You are watching the World 24/7 on the NDTV network. I'm Parmeshwar Bawa. Let's begin with a quick look at the headlines we're tracking at the moment. US President Joe Biden has announced a major new policy initiative shielding tens of thousands of undocumented immigrants residing in the United States from deportation in what amounts to one of the most sweeping immigration measures of his tenure in office. Diplomats have said at least 550 pilgrims have died during the Hajj, underscoring the grueling nature of the pilgrimage, which again unfolded in scorching temperatures this year. A bipartisan group of US lawmakers led by Congressman Michael McCaul and former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi arrived in Dharamshala to visit the Tibetan parliament in exile and meet with the Dalai Lama. Boeing CEO was hammered by a Senate panel over the company's safety and quality lapses, a host of whistleblower allegations about company corner cutting and retaliation, and his own pay package. Thailand's Senate has voted to pass a marriage equality bill, putting the country on track to become the first in Southeast Asia to legalize same-sex marriage. China's nuclear force is now 3 times larger than India's. We have a deep dive lined up for you based on the key findings from the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute's latest report. Nvidia became the world's most valuable company after its share price climbed to an all-time high on Tuesday. Well, our big focus, the US President Joe Biden has announced a major new policy initiative shielding tens of thousands of undocumented immigrants residing in the United States from deportation. Now, in what amounts to one of the most sweeping immigration measures of Biden's tenure in his office. Now, under this initiative, the US Department of Homeland Security, they will take action to effectively grant federal protections to some undocumented spouses and children of US citizens. This new program, known as Parole in Place, will affect an estimated 5 lakh spouses of US citizens and 50,000 children under the age of 21. It's the same immigration policy that has been used for qualifying military families since the year 2007. But the timing of this proposal is nearly as notable as the substance, coming just weeks after the president unveiled a restrictive new measure to clamp down on asylum at the southern border. That policy drew sharp rebukes from progressive allies who accused the administration of adopting a wholly conservative framework toward immigration. Let's take a look at who qualifies, though. So one must have lived in the US for 10 years before the 17th of June 2024. The immigrant must be married to a US citizen. They will also get a 3-year period to apply for legal status, and they will also get temporary work permit in order to earn a day-to-day living. Let's listen in to what the US president had to say regarding these new sweeping immigration measures.
These young people known as dreamers, Hispanics, South Asians, and more, who came to America as children, only know America as their home, have been able to live and learn out of the shadows. So many of them have graduated from high school and college and are starting families on their own, building successful careers, serving our nation in uniform, and so much more. We're a much better and stronger nation because of dreamers like Javier, who just introduced me. So today I'm announcing new measures to clarify and speed up work visas to help people, including dreamers, who have graduated from U.S. colleges and universities, landed jobs in high-demand, high-skilled professions that we need to have grow to see our economy grow. It's the right thing to do. Just ask business leaders, ask labor leaders, ask economists, ask elected officials. They know it's good for American business. They know it's good for the American economy. They know it's good for America, period. This step builds on other actions we've taken to support dreamers.
It is very important that we permit families to stay unified when someone is married to a U.S. citizen, permitting those families to stay together so that little children don't have to wonder when they go off to school in the morning whether or not mama or daddy will still be there when they get home late in the afternoon. The president, once again, is doing what Joe Biden does best. He is using his tools to try to advance the values of the American people. And that means treating our families as important and helping those families that have mixed legal status on immigration. So I strongly support him on that.
Obviously trying to walk a line between his progressive left that wants open. American people are just kind of like, they're sick of it. And frankly, they blame Biden. So I think all these are both him trying to have his cake and eat it too, in the one sense saying he's going to shut the border down, but in another sense reassuring his progressive left that he's still going to be sensitive to letting people in. He's just got a political problem. And he's got a political problem because it's going against the instincts of his advisors.
Well, this latest move stands in stark contrast to Joe Biden's sweeping immigration order that was issued early in June. But for the latest from Ground Zero, let's go across to my colleague Nick Harper's report from Washington, D.C.
Well, this plan gives around 500,000 spouses of American citizens a path to citizenship. It means they can apply for a green card, which gives them the right to live and work legally in the United States, which in turn can be converted into full US citizenship in the future. Around 50,000 undocumented children of US citizens will also be eligible. Up until now, spouses of US citizens have been able to apply for green cards, but have had to leave the US in order to do so, and that can mean as much as a decade outside of America while the paperwork is processed. The Biden administration says this new plan is a common sense fix that will keep families together and keep them in their jobs, thereby helping to boost the US economy. More than 500,000 undocumented immigrants are eligible for the new program. Now, many of them are Mexicans, but it's thought that it could also benefit thousands of Indian Americans who are currently living here in the US. President Biden is hoping to win over voters with this announcement, in particular voters in key battleground and border states like Arizona. It's also an olive branch to immigration advocates who heavily criticized Biden's executive order earlier this month, which limited migrants' ability to seek asylum. But Biden's rival in November's presidential election, Donald Trump, has called it a mass amnesty plan and warned it will lead to a greater surge in migrant crime and will cost taxpayers millions of dollars. Trump added in a statement that Biden doesn't care about American lives that will be forever destroyed by the illegal criminals he is importing. This new plan could, of course, face legal challenges in the courts, as is often the case when any president or administration tries to take action on immigration. The application process for the new program is scheduled to open by the end of the summer, providing hundreds of thousands protection from deportation, something Donald Trump has threatened to do if he's re-elected in November. Nick Harper, NDTV, Washington.
And to better understand how this new policy impacts Indians in the United States, we have with us Soundarya Balasubramani. Always a pleasure to chat with you, Soundarya. 500,000 immigrants could eventually get US citizenship under this sweeping new plan from Biden. Tell us how this new plan differs from the regulations that are already in place for undocumented immigrants.
Right. So I believe, DACA was introduced all the way back in 2012 under the Obama administration.
Yes.
The main difference with this one is that President Biden has now allowed undocumented spouses of US citizens who've been here for at least 10 years and came through the country illegally. So there's about 500,000 people who fall into this very specific category right now. And all of them will now get a chance to get legal status, work in the US, and get a chance to get their permanent residency in the future.
In fact, as per the Pew Research Center, Indians actually form the third largest group of undocumented immigrants in the US. This policy is now likely to spare them of deportation fears, right?
Yeah, absolutely. But more than deportation, I feel like it gives them the right to legally work in this country and get a path to citizenship, which for legal immigration for Indians has always been a struggle. I mean, green card backlogs can go as much as 100 years for certain Indians through legal immigration routes. So I think it's a huge win for them.
But Soundarya, how crucial is immigration as an issue for voters in the upcoming US elections? The US president's new policy has a related political motive that many political analysts argue they cannot ignore.
Yeah, I think this has always been, first of all, it's very important. especially for the undocumented people, getting the right to stay here legally means that one day they will become citizens and they will have to vote. And at that point, I think the Democrats are hoping that they vote for the Democrats. And there's about 11 million undocumented people today in this country. And so that's 11 million votes that Democrats might get a decade from now. But I think they're working backwards and thinking long term. But it's definitely the right thing to do.
Well, but Biden's new policy, it sets up in significant political contrast with the presumptive GOP presidential nominee Donald Trump's, whose hardline stance on immigration includes a push for mass deportations. But as far as public sentiment is concerned, which way is the tide favoring at the moment? Who would you say is leading in terms of popularity?
To be very honest, I haven't seen the latest poll numbers, but I can only say that from my standpoint, as an immigrant myself in this country, I hope President Biden wins.
Well, Saundara, always a pleasure to chat with you. Thanks so much for joining us with that brief update from Ground Zero.
Thanks for having me.
With that, let's turn our attention to the other crucial story we're tracking. Diplomats have said at least 550 pilgrims have died during the Hajj, underscoring the grueling nature of the pilgrimage, which again unfolded in scorching temperatures this year. At least 323 of those who died were Egyptians, most of them succumbing to heat-related illnesses. This is what two Arab diplomats coordinating their country's responses informed AFP. All of them, the Egyptians, died because of heat, except for one who sustained fatal injuries during a minor crowd crush. One of the diplomats confirmed, adding that the total figure came from the hospital morgue in the Al Muassem neighborhood of Mecca. Meanwhile, a group of 7 US legislators from either of the US's main political parties arrived in Dharamshala to meet with the Dalai Lama, with its leaders saying US President Joe Biden will soon sign a bill that pushes for negotiations between Tibet and China. Among the legislators are Michael McCaul, a Republican who is chairman of the US House of Representatives Foreign Affairs Committee, and Nancy Pelosi, a Democrat who has served as Speaker of the House, which is the lower chamber of the country's federal legislature. When asked if Joe Biden would sign the bill, which is officially titled the Promoting a Resolution to the Tibet-China Dispute Act, into law soon, Mr. McCaul said, according to Reuters, yes, he will, yes, he will. Let's turn our attention now to Thailand, where the Senate has passed the final reading of a historic marriage equality bill, paving the way for the country to become the first in Southeast Asia to recognize same-sex marriage. Thailand will become the third country in Asia where same-sex couples can get married, after Taiwan and Nepal, and the first in Southeast Asia. In October, as you know, India's top court declined to grant legal recognition to same-sex marriages, saying it should be decided by Parliament. Here are the key takeaways as far as Thailand is concerned.
In a monumental step forward for LGBTQ+ rights, Thailand has become the first country in Southeast Asia to legalize same-sex marriage.
วันนี้เป็นวันหนึ่งที่รอคอยมาเกือบจะทั้งชีวิตเพราะว่าปีนี้เกือบจะ70แล้วนะคะกว่าจดหมายฉบับนี้จะผ่านเราลุ้นกันมานานมากแล้วไม่เคยคิดเลยค่ะว่าจะมีวันนี้วันที่18มิถุนายนประวัติศาสตร์ประเทศไทยจะต้องจารึกไว้แล้วก็ทั่วโลกจะจดจำว่าประเทศไทยเนี่ยกล้าหาญมากที่ตัดสินใจอย่างถูกต้องเห็นความเท่าเทียมของมนุษย์สมควรที่ทุกคนจะได้รับ
In its last legislative hurdle, 130 of the 152 Thai Senate members in attendance voted in favor of the Marriage Equality Act, despite the government and state agencies historically holding conservative values. Its approval means that Thailand is the third country in Asia to legalize same-sex marriage after Taiwan and Nepal.
ความภาคภูมิใจอย่างยิ่งที่ร่างกฎหมายสมรสเท่าเทียมนี้ที่ทุกคนได้ร่วมสร้างประวัติศาสตร์ใหม่ และวันนี้ถือเป็นข้อพิสูจน์ความพยายามที่ไม่หยุดของทุกท่านค่ะ
The Marriage Equality Bill grants full legal, financial, and medical rights for marriage partners of any gender and will need endorsement from the king before becoming a reality. After which, the law will come into effect within 120 days of its publication in the Government Gazette. The legislation will now amend the country's civil and commercial code and alter gender-specific labels such as men and women with gender-neutral terms such as individual.
On behalf of the Royal Thai government, I'd like to earnestly congratulate our Thais and every voices that have been pushing this legislation forward. Today is finally happening in Thailand, which makes us the third country in Asia and the first country in ASEAN for two individuals, not just ladies and gentlemen, two individuals who can tie the knot without the references to men, women, husband, and wives.
Samia Afsar for NDTV.
Well, news and updates continue in a moment. We're slipping into a very quick break for now. Our other big focus. According to key findings from the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute's latest report, China's arsenal may reach 1,000 warheads by 2030, though it is still smaller than the US and Russia. CIPRI emphasizes that all nuclear-armed states, including India and Pakistan, are pursuing multiple warheads on ballistic missiles, enhancing their potential destructive capabilities. China's nuclear expansion, though, reflects a broader trend of modernization among nuclear-armed states. The geopolitical landscape remains tense, with significant implications for global security and nuclear deterrence strategies. China is expanding its nuclear power and is on track to become an atomic superpower alongside the United States as well as Russia. Right now, China has 500 nuclear warheads. That's according to CIPRI. But the Pentagon estimates China will roughly quadruple its stockpile by the year 2035. This quiet build-up of China's nuclear arsenal comes as various conflicts continue to rage around the world, including the wars in Ukraine and Gaza. The war in Ukraine has had a negative impact on nuclear arms control talks and has diminished opportunities to break the long-standing deadlock in nuclear arms control and reverse the worrisome trend of nuclear armed states developing and deploying new weapon systems. But this is not just a case of making more warheads, which they are doing. They're also building more advanced nuclear submarines, building new nuclear silos, building more mobile launch vehicles. So basically, this is across-the-board nuclear advancement. China has up to now been much smaller nuclear power than the US and Russia. It's had what it called a minimal deterrent, so that would make it more difficult for countries to contemplate war against China. It had not felt the need to get up to this sort of nuclear superpower levels that we saw the US and Russia reach during the Cold War. Now, basically, that whole landscape is changing because China is closing the gap with the US and with Russia. Many are curious whether Russia is helping China do that. Well, they are so. As per the New York Times, there's this new nuclear reactor from China that could really help them ramp up their nuclear material, and Russia has helped them get that reactor on the verge of being operational. Russia is not providing nuclear weapons to China, but they seem now more willing to cooperate than they were in the past. What's Beijing's justification for why they want to build this nuclear stockpile, though? Well, the US, as you can see in this graph, has been undertaking quite an expensive and extensive nuclear modernization program of its own. And so Beijing's justification could be that, hey, in order to keep pace with the United States, we need to expand our own capabilities and the survivability of our nuclear forces. Then there's the question of whether China will continue to maintain this policy that it has of no first strike, which they say we only have nuclear weapons as a deterrent. We're not going to move first. We're not going to strike anybody else in the nuclear realm. That's still their policy on their books. But some experts assert that there is an open question of if it came to war with the US over Taiwan, say, would China maintain that policy? In other news, Nvidia, long known in the niche gaming community for its graphic chips, is now the most valuable public company in the entire world. Shares of the chip maker climbed 3.6% on Tuesday, lifting the company's market cap to $3.34 trillion, surpassing Microsoft, which is now valued at $3.32 trillion. Earlier this month, as we had reported, my colleague Vishal had done a detailed report on how Nvidia had hit $3 trillion for the first time and passed Apple. Nvidia shares are up more than 170% so far this year and went a leg higher after the company reported first quarter earnings in May. Sakshi Bajaj has the lowdown.
Nvidia becomes the world's most valuable company. The California-based chip designer is helping lay the foundation for AI revolution, essentially. Now, as far as share prices are concerned, share prices climbed to an all-time high. And remember, Nvidia's shares have risen nearly 200% this year alone so far. Nvidia's market cap is at $3.34 trillion, surpassing Microsoft's $3.32 trillion. And in February, remember, Nvidia's market cap hit the $3 trillion mark as essentially as early as that and surpassed Apple's market cap back then. Now, demand for Nvidia's specialized chips continues to spike, and analysts remain upbeat as far as demand is surging, and they also feel that going forward, earnings for Nvidia could see a record high.
Well, the stock has also multiplied by more than 9-fold since the end of 2022, a rise that's coincided with the emergence of generative artificial intelligence. With that, let's also get you a crucial update as far as the Boeing Senate hearing is concerned. Well, US senators attacked the CEO of Boeing for the plane maker's tarnished safety record, overshadowing his apology to families who lost loved ones in two 737 MAX crashes and acceptance of responsibility after a January mid-air emergency. Chief Executive Dave Calhoun faced repeated questions about how much he is being paid, Boeing's safety culture, and why he is not immediately resigning instead of retiring by year's end at a hearing before the Senate Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations. The CEO of Boeing repeatedly reassured the senators that he was turning the company around and focusing on preventing any safety issues. In fact, senators also questioned the boss over its treatment of whistleblowers over the years. Listen in.
Senator, I'm sticking this through. I'm proud of having taken the job. I'm proud of our
this
safety record, and I am
You're proud
very
of this safety
proud
record.
of our Boeing people.
You're proud of this safety record.
I am proud of every action we have taken.
Every action you've taken?
Yes, sir.
Wow. Wow. There's some news for you. Well, behind you can't see it. Behind you, the folks are showing pictures of the people who are the victims of your safety record. I think we can all see them. And I think the American public, when they fear to get on their airplanes, they understand your safety record. And frankly, sir, I think it's a travesty that you're still in your job.
On Lion Air Flight 610 and the Ethiopian Airlines Flight 302. I would like to apologize on behalf of all of our Boeing associates spread throughout the world, past and present, for your losses. They're gut-wrenching. And I apologize for the grief that we have caused. And I want you to know we are totally committed in their memory to work and focus on safety for as long as we're employed by Boeing. So again, I'm sorry.
Well, in other news, Russia's President Vladimir Putin arrived in North Korea after he said the two countries want to cooperate closely to overcome US-led sanctions in the face of intensifying confrontations with Washington. The two leaders held a brief meeting soon after the arrival and are scheduled to meet again today when they will sign agreements designed to deepen a relationship that has strengthened significantly since Russia's February 2022 invasion of Ukraine. The United States and South Korea say they have evidence that North Korea has supplied dozens of ballistic missiles and more than 11,000 containers of munitions to Russia for use in Ukraine, while Kim is understood to have sought Russian food and energy aid and help with his country's space program.
Putin's visits to North Korea demonstrates and confirms the very close alignment between Russia and authoritarian states like North Korea, but also China and Iran. And this also demonstrates that our security is not regional, it's global. What happens in Europe matters for Asia, and what happens in Asia matters for us. And this is clearly demonstrated in Ukraine, where Iran, North Korea, China are propping up, fueling Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine.
Switching tracks, pop star Justin Timberlake was arrested on suspicion of driving while intoxicated in a chic town east of New York City and spent the night in jail before being arraigned and released. This 43-year-old was actually taken into custody in the Hamptons in the early hours of Tuesday, is what we're being told, and he spent 24 hours in jail. Well, as always, news and updates continue. We'll keep tracking the latest updates for you on the World 24/7. Do stay tuned.